Ma'am, during your childhood, you always wanted to become a cinematographer, ma'am, or something else at that point of time?
I actually didn't know about cinematography at all at that point. So it was not something that I even thought of. Cinematography, in fact, came to me much later when I was in college and I was working in my summer internships in a film production house. That's when I thought of cinematography.
Ma'am, did you study cinematography? You have studied in film school as a filmmaker
I have
in India.
studied in New York. I did a short course in filmmaking. It was not a course in cinematography at all. In fact, it was far broader and general. I came back to Bombay and then I started working with a cinematographer called Gopal Shah, who did advertising work. And that's where I started. So it was not, I didn't study cinematography at all.
Ma'am, were there point of time when you thought you wanted to become a filmmaker?
As in when?
Because you study filmmaking
So what do you
courses.
mean as a filmmaker? I am a filmmaker. A
Okay,
cinematographer is a filmmaker.
okay. Ma'am, what's the difference between a filmmaker and a cinematographer?
See, filmmaker is everybody who works in film. You have directors, you have cinematographers, you have all the other sound designer, production designer, but we're all filmmakers. We all make films in various aspects.
Okay. Ma'am, what is the job of a cinematographer? If you can detail,
A
explain.
cinematographer basically is well, what we used to call in the old day, the cameraman. So, what a cinematographer, also known as a director of photography in America, does is well, I would like to put it as you're basically the eyes of the director. So, you get a script and you get the director's intent and what the director wants to achieve, and then it is your job to actually figure out how to translate that into a visual. Of course, you don't work alone, you work with other departments as well, because a production designer who is doing all the sets and the visual look, then you have costumes, etc. But primarily, the job of a cinematographer is to translate what is on the written page into a visual image.
Ma'am, cinematographer also involves in post-production, in editing.
No, not in editing. The cinematographer is involved in my own part of post production, which is basically the grade. As I was telling you, I'm grading. So what ends up happening is once we finish shooting, then it's like in still photography, you have processing. So the image is there, but it is not color corrected to what maybe I think is correct for the particular film. So then we go into a post production studio, and there are various kinds of machines where you have something called a base light or a resolve, and there are color correction artists. So you sit with them and you actually color correct your image, which is also known as grading or digital intermediate (DI). That is the accurate word.
Ma'am, you have also worked as an assistant in Deepa's Mehta's Earth and Jane Campion's Holy Smoke. So, ma'am, what was your experience there?
It was 28 years ago, so it was a very long time. But it was a great starting ground, because I think it's nice to work with different kinds of people because the more you work with different people, more the experience and more the variety of lighting styles of different cinematographers. So very enriching at that point. And I think very important in early days to work with many different people.
Ma'am, after that, you also work in advertisement. Is there a difference when you work in a film and in advertisement?
Yes, the very different actually. The medium is the same because you're doing the same thing actually. You're taking a camera and you're lighting, and so all that is the same. But what one is trying to achieve is, I think, quite different because in a feature film, when you're shooting that, it's far longer. So you have to look after things over long narrative arcs. So you have to look at the beginning of the film, middle of the film, end of the film, to put it simply. But it's like running a marathon versus a sprint. And advertising most often now is much more about style than it is about storytelling. So it's we use the same tools, but we just set out to achieve different things.
Okay. Ma'am, you have said at that point of time when you were starting, there was only one cinematographer, female cinematographer. The times have changed now.
Yes, the times have changed, but not enough. There's still very, very few. I mean, they did a whole study last year and the year before that where there is barely 2% of cinematographers in India are women. And I would say that is at the top end of the number. So it's changed, but nowhere near where it should be. It's still quite terrible.
Like, ma'am, in feature films or in web series? I think.
In web series, there are little more number of women than there are in feature films. As per the last study, I'm only quoting the last study. That's how I know this. But because web series, I guess, is allowing for more. Feature films. What ends up happening is these, as we're seeing more and more, these monstrously big films, and they're very male oriented and male dominated, and it's becoming more and more. So I think it's becoming limited. There are fewer women shooting those kind of films than there are in web series and advertising.
Okay. Ma'am, then how did you find your first cinematography job in film?
Well, the director who I've shot 4 films with, Raja Menon, he was the first person who actually wanted to shoot with me. And I put it like that because that's how it was back in the day. There were very few women cinematographers. But we'd worked together on a lot of advertising work at that point. And we got along really well. And at the end of the day, a cinematographer and director is like a marriage. You have to really gel. And we did. So I shot with him first and last.
Ma'am, you have shot four of his film.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, Barahane, Airlift, Chef, and then Peeper recently. So, ma'am, you have done so many of his work. Can you tell your experience while working with him individually in those films?
That's a big question. I can give you a general answer on that. I think cinematographer directors are saying is also a large part based on trust. I have to trust his vision in the film, and he has to trust that I'm able to bring his vision to life. That I think is the primary relationship between a director cinematographer. From there comes everything else. So I think that's what really works between us. That he trusts me, I trust him, because filmmaking is an art at the end of the day, and it's quite a vulnerable process. So you have to believe that you're with people who have your back, who you can work with, and then comes the starting point of, okay, let's take this script and let's break it down. But if you don't have trust in each other, then I don't trust what you've written or you want to direct or what your vision is, and you don't trust how I'm going to bring it to life. So everything else then will not work out if the first fundamental trust is not there between the director and cinematographer. That I think is extremely important, and that becomes the starting block of then building upon it. And we read the script. I mean, he of course has written the script or co-written a script, or it's his script, so he will share it with me, and then we have many 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 conversations, and the conversations are not necessarily about how should we shoot this. That comes much later, but it's far more about, I like to understand how what's in his head. What are you trying to say in this film? What are you trying to say in this scene? What do you want to get across? And from there you come up with a kind of a visual language on how you want to tell this story.
Ma'am, you have also worked as an underwater cinematographer. So, what's that? Can you explain?
Yeah, that's interesting actually. Underwater cinematography basically is the kind of underwater cinematography I do is not documentary work or things like that. It's basically shooting in the sea. I'm sorry, shooting scenes in films. So for all Hindi films, South, whatever, for basically feature films, there are scenes that are written in sometimes, which could be as simple as two people swimming. It could be, maybe a fight sequence where two people fall into the water and somebody's killing somebody, or a car crashes into the water, or anything, right? Any dramatic episode. And most often, underwater shoots are dramatic because that's why you introduce it into the story. So I, the again the tools are the same. I wear scuba diving equipment. We have cameras, and it's not that we have underwater cameras, but it's all the cameras that we use on shoot. We have these very very large housings for those, which are very high, very expensive and very big, because our cameras are big. So we take a whole cinematic camera and we put it into the pools or into the sea, depending on what the scene requires. And most often we end up shooting in a swimming pool because it becomes like a studio. So you set up, it's like, as opposed to going and shooting on location, we shoot there because we have far more control. And underwater shoots are very tricky. So we shoot in a pool because we have more control over the water. There's no current, there's no issues like that. So we set up a scene and we shoot there, and then with the help of VFX, sometimes they extend the background or they do whatever else is required. And also for actors, it's far safer to be in a pool because it's more in control. So that's how we do underwater shoots.
Ma'am, how important is lighting in cinematography? As I've
Well,
heard.
it is everything, right? So you have maybe three arms of cinematography. One is lighting, one is camera, one is lensing, and there is camera movement, well, and grading. So one can't exist without the other. So it's extremely important. It is like a painting. So there is a sense. The only way you get dimension in an image is through light, lens, and movement. So
Ma'am, how you choose a specific camera lens and a specific camera movement? Is it with conversation with filmmaker or cinematographer?
sometimes it is with the director, and sometimes it is not. And we also have teams down the line. So I have in my team, I have someone known as a gaffer who is my lighting, who handles all the lighting on the film. There is a grip who handles camera movement and rigging and things like that. So one does it in conversation with them as well. This is the kind of scene, this is what I hope to achieve. So you do it with the director on one side, and you do it with your team on one side, because there are experts down the line also who handle this. So it's kind of filmmaking is not a singular craft. We don't do anything by ourselves. Everything is done with a very big team to help you, and people who are experts in their little bits.
Ma'am, how many people, there's cinematographer, how many people are there in camera department?
Well, camera. Well, let me take a film like Pipa, because that was. Um, so we had a very big lighting team, of course, because the areas were big. So there were about, I think, 20, 20 to 25 lighting. It was very big. I'm giving you the biggest example. So it's very hard to say because it depends on what you're shooting. If you're shooting one soap on a table, you may not need so many people. But on a film like that, we had about 20, 25 in the lighting department. The bigger thing in Pipa was the grips department, because we were shooting tanks. How do you shoot a tank? Now, you sometimes we used real tanks to mount, stabilized arms on. So there was a lot of grip equipment there. So there was another, but I think 8, 10 people there. There was 4 cameras at any point. So it was a very big camera team, about 50 people, probably one of the biggest I'll ever get to work with.
Ma'am, you have also worked with Akshay Kumar in Airlift. How was the experience there?
Very good, very good. He was the thing about him is he's extremely professional. He shows up on time. Now more and more actors are professional, but back then it was not. He was one of the few who still, so if it was you had to be there for a 7 o'clock shot, he would be there on time, ready on set, very disciplined. So it helps a lot, because it helps with planning, and eventually filmmaking is all about planning. But if you have an actor who is predictable, that it helps you to then achieve what you need to do.
Ma'am, what is the shooting time like? People think the shooting there's 8 hours of shoot, and a lot of the time went to thinking and lighting. But how is the shooting part there?
No, so that's not how it really happens. Hopefully, you're not thinking on set. All the thinking happens in a process that we call pre production, which is called prep. And that is a very, very important part of filmmaking. It's not that, you show up on set and like, chalo, now let's figure out how to shoot this scene. You'll never be able to, because each day of shoot is very expensive, because you've got all this equipment, you've got people, you've got stars. So each hour is very expensive. So you spend all that time thinking and preparing on something called pre-production, so that when you come, hopefully on set, you're doing very little thinking and you're doing much more executing. So all your thinking should have happened before, and I think that is the success of a well-planned film, because then you can shoot less days because you've planned better, and your budget will be far more in control.
Yes. Ma'am, if somebody wants to become a cinematographer, as you've said, you did not went to film school or you did not study, you learn on the job. So the advice you would give to someone is to go to film school or you can learn on the job.
See, there are two ways to do this. One is to go to film school. I'm not going to say don't go to film school. If you can, great. But it's not necessary. It's not that there is only one way to become a cinematographer and no other way. There are other ways. So you start working, get on a set in any capacity at the lowest of the lows. And I think that's very important. The problem I see these days is a lot of people, a lot of young cinematographer aspirants are coming in and they want to start shooting immediately, and that's not the ideal way. That's not how the system works, and it shouldn't work. Eventually you should apprentice, you should work your way up, because the more, as I said, the more you work under people, with different people who have more skill than you, who have more experience, it makes your journey a lot easier, and you learn so much more because you have so much of a broader outlook than just coming out there at 19 and 20 and saying I'm a cinematographer. So I would really say work with people, get the experience. You're getting it for free. You can make mistakes when there's some other cinematographer who's getting, so you make all your mistakes under people so that by the time you start, you also have much more experience and understanding of the job.
Ma'am, what are your favorite cinematographers that inspired you?
My favorite cinematographers, there's so many because it's not about one person. I think there are various cinematographers who do various films well. So I don't really like to say one,
You
but
can
one
list them all,
definitely
ma'am.
mattered.
It's
Sorry?
not. You can list them all.
No, no, no. It's not a question that I'm hiding it or anything. I'm just saying it's not something that I think of as who's my favorite cinematographer or favorite cinematographers because one looks at so much work. You like certain things in one, certain in another. Bigger films allow cinematographers to do so much more. So one tends to look at them. But I don't think I really have any favorite cinematographers.
Ma'am, your favorite films?
Again, it changes every year, it changes every minute. I go back and watch something 5 times. I may have seen something when I was 19. I go back and watch it now, and it's a whole other film. So it's a process of growth, actually. It's not that I have some top 10 films that I love more than anything. It's something that keeps changing, keep growing. And I think films that influenced me when I was younger, I can say, I can't say favorite, but I think they were far more influential because that time we used to watch so much of, the Russian masters, and we watched so much of French New Wave and things like that. And so that was the kind of stuff that influenced me at that point. I would say Tarkovsky influenced me. Then, of course, when we go back, we talk about Godard, we talk about Bergman. But these are because these were those classic film school, not even film school, but when you're young, these are things that you watch because you watch what are you standing on the shoulders of earlier filmmakers, of earlier craftspeople, whether it's painters, it's artists, because this is how we learn. So I think that's what's influential in the beginning. I wouldn't say favorite because I don't have any favorite filmmakers, but influences in your life.
Ma'am, currently you are working in your future project currently.
I am right now in the middle of projects. I'm going to start working on another long form project, which is not starting at the moment. It's in a little while, which I can't really name right now. But in between, I keep doing a lot of advertising, underwater work. So that's what keeps me between projects.
Okay. Ma'am, thank you so much, ma'am, for
Not at
joining.
all right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Akash. All the best.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for joining.
Okay. All right. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.